what? Well, here's a tip. Cheat cards tell you statistics for whether you hit or stand on every move. If you're into stats, this could be your ticket to winning. And it is totally legal. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
The Pirates use that thing, Joe. It's like once every 15 years, we'll hope for the perfect storm with lightning in a bottle, then we'll try to rebuild it again. Enough, man. In this day and age, with the prospects that you can certainly have by stinking every year and top-flight talent like you see in Paul Skeens, it's just a shame, and it gets on my nerves. Like, for me, being a Phillies fan, I think it's hilarious. Like, I never want Pittsburgh to be good. Why? Not because it's a rivalry. It's just a team you don't have to worry about in the playoffs, and your team can make the playoffs.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The NFL has ruined the concept of trade requests. It's not real. It's just a negotiating tactic. I'd appreciate reporters changing the language, because in the NBA, when a player requests a trade, they get dealt. In the NFL, nobody actually thinks it matters. If Jacoby Myers is going to buck that trend, and if Jacoby Myers is going to get traded, we'll see where he goes.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Hopefully starting in 2027, where I think the schedule could just completely get blown up, which would be so exciting for the fans, the players. So there's interesting things that I've heard that that would be like one of the first things that could say that people are talking about, and that things could really get changed up a little bit.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
A rough opening weekend for the top-paid college football coaches. Plus, how much does it cost for a quarterback in the SEC and Big Ten? Hi, everyone, and welcome to Front Office Sports Today from FOS Studios here in New York City. I'm Baker Machado.
And I'm Dan Roberts, in for Renee Washington. Thanks for joining us every day. Right here, we talk about the intersection of sports, business, and culture. We've got the very latest on Caitlin Clark's new signature shoe dropping next year. But first, let's get into the shooter.
Yes, thank you, Dan, and good to have you here. And let's start in the NFL. As new Green Bay Packers defensive end Micah Parsons may receive an injection to deal with back tightness. This in hopes that he can make his debut Sunday against the Lions. This all according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, but this is not guaranteed he's going to play in the game. Now, this comes as a separate ESPN report from Don Van Natta and Jeremy Fowler say that Parsons' previous team, the Cowboys, had offered him north of $150 million in guarantees. That's more than the $136 million in guaranteed money he got from the Packers. Now, while the Cowboys reportedly offered more total guaranteed money, the Packers, Dan, that deal gave him more on a per-year basis. So what do you think at the end of the day was the better deal then?
Well, it's becoming a he said, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of drama here. There's a separate story coming out that claimed that there were locker room issues and that people on the Cowboys resented Parsons or vice versa. And the one thing I'd say, I don't question ESPN's reporting on this at all, but you always have to wonder why sources are sharing the information they're sharing. In other words, cui bono, who benefits, right? Why would someone leak such a thing? And does it help make their case look better that they basically lost him or let him go? Right? So who got the better deal here, and did Parsons make the right decision? I mean, I guess it depends on who you believe, because Parsons claimed that Jerry floated some stuff and then said, oh, no, that wasn't really the negotiation talk.
Right.
And then Jerry Jones's camp said, no, that was the talk. We thought we had made a commitment right there, right? So back and forth we go.
I mean, on top of that, there's been a lot of, I think, people seeing on their social media profiles over the week, stuff that maybe he was going to make more because of taxes in Texas than he would have in Green Bay because of the state taxes.
Yeah, the math doesn't really fully math there, though. I mean, I think the taxes will be higher than they would have been, but I don't think it's so high that it actually means he'll earn less.
But if Parsons doesn't play very much this year, does all of a sudden all of that negativity to Jerry Jones that he's getting right now about this deal then sort of subside then?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the Cowboys, you're hearing now that maybe he's got a little bit of an injury. You never celebrate an injury, but it certainly would help matters if he's not very good with the Packers. It's just like Luka.
Yeah, no, and by the way, that's a very good point. Meanwhile, ahead of Monday's European soccer transfer deadline, Liverpool signed Newcastle striker Alexander Isak for $170 million. It could be upwards of even more than that. It would likely be the most expensive transfer in Premier League history. Liverpool had tried to get Isak last month on a $150 million transfer. This after the Swedish international said he wanted to move away from Newcastle. And Dan, this now brings Liverpool's total summer spending to over $550 million.
Nice to have that Fenway Sports Group number, right?
Yes.
I mean, one thing just when you see all these headlines is people, I think, in the U.S., unless you are really steeped in this stuff, and you can be a casual soccer fan, but unless you're really a soccer head, a football head, you just never quite fathom the money that we're talking about with no limit, right? I mean, I feel like every couple months we say record transfer, new record-setting transfer. This isn't even a player I'm that familiar with. I mean, we were talking about, Son Heung-min to the LAFC recently, and that being a record for MLS. I'm sure this record will be broken in a matter of weeks, but separately there was a new report out about the Premier League spending and the transfer window hitting a new record. So.
And by the way, Liverpool still tops on the table right now in the English Premier League. All right, let's go back to football. Lee Corso's final College Game Day was the most watched edition of the show ever. An average of 3.5 million people tuned in Saturday. 5 million watched the last 15 minutes to see the 90-year-old Corso make his last prediction of his ESPN career, putting on Brutus the Buckeyes mascot head like he did in 1996 when he made his very first prediction on the show wearing a mascot head. Even Fox's Big Noon Kickoff even showed Corso's final pick out of respect to the longtime college football analyst.
I love
that.
I love that, and it's great that it rated well. It is interesting. I mean, a lot of the show, and I say this as a huge Corso fan, but a lot of the show, and I watched, was kind of looking back, nostalgia, emotional, remember when. I didn't think it was the most compelling game day I've ever seen, but I love that it rated well. I think it was a good, classy move that Fox did that. I will say, too, like the whole Big Noon versus Game Day, it's not really a competition still. Come on, it's Game Day's the premiere, and Big Noon is still trying to claw back some.
But if you saw the reaction from Ohio State fans at Portnoy, you can tell that you know what's coming down the road for more of these. Meanwhile, it wasn't the best of debuts for North Carolina's Bill Belichick, as the Tar Heels were routed by TCU in front of 50,000 fans, including North Carolina legends like Michael Jordan and a national TV audience as well. In fact, it was a terrible weekend for 5 of the 10 highest-paid college coaches in football, including Alabama's Kalen DeBoer, who also lost in week 1. So what do the buyouts look like for some of these coaches, and how hot is their seat? Let's take a look in our main event. All right, let's bring in our college sports reporter, Amanda Kristovich. So, Amanda, what a statistic. 5 of the 10 highest paid coaches losing in the first week. Thoughts on that?
Well, I'm maybe not as surprised as a lot of other folks, because some of these salaries are really holdovers from, an era of college sports that almost seems to be bygone. Of course, we are going to talk about Alabama and how they were such a powerhouse for so many years. And, maybe the reasons why they aren't is a story for another day, the NIL era. But when you look at the teams and the coaches who are the highest paid in a lot of college sports, it's usually the blue bloods. It's not the sort of new faces, right? Because these schools have these contracts for 6 to 10 years with big buyouts. And so I guess I'm not as shocked as everybody else is that has been the case.
And that's a great point. Now, does that make, Dion being on the list, or even Belichick with UNC being on the list of the highest paid, a little surprising? UNC really wasn't known as a football school. Now, credit to Mac Brown. They had some solid seasons there, and then the Buffs, too. Colorado, we got an alum right here. Not in the past a place that you would think would have one of the 10 highest paid coaches.
It doesn't surprise me that Dion and Belichick have big paychecks, right? Because in a way, they are representing sort of the new bloods, but they themselves are incumbent football greats. But I definitely think, Clemson, I laugh every time that I see Clemson on this list. Not to knock them. I mean, they were in the playoff. They're a good team. They're a great team. And they have been for many years, but I just sort of laugh at this idea that, when's the last time they won a national championship? And Dabo Swinney is always on that list.
Well, Dan mentioned Belichick. Let's obviously address this because, as he mentioned, North Carolina has not gotten nearly this much attention for their football team. This is why they had all of their alumni stars, from Michael Jordan to Mia Hamm to Julius Peppers, all at the game last night. And ESPN having a national televised audience as well. How bad is this of a loss for Belichick, given that he's making $10 million a year, and he's been sort of adamant that he's implementing an NFL program at this university?
I always say that it is not fair to judge a coach or a team by one game.
Especially the first one.
Well, sure, especially the first one. But here's who should be concerned: ESPN.
Yep.
Because they are the ones who put all of this investment into the Belichick mania, right? I mean, UNC on their own didn't do that. Belichick himself, we can argue about his PR, stunts over the offseason, that maybe he had some sort of involvement in that, or maybe takes a little bit of the blame. But ultimately, if I'm ESPN, I was really excited about another draw for ACC football, and that may not play out throughout the season in a way that, Deion was able to play out even without having a team that was so incredible and a team that made the playoff, but he still was able to put on this show for a couple seasons, and he still is in some ways. But if I'm ESPN, I'm disappointed, to say the least.
And while we have a minute left with you, let's talk about Kalen DeBoer. Obviously a huge loss for Alabama. A lot of people are already talking about what his buyout would be if Alabama decided to eat his contract. Do we know some of the specifics of that?
Yeah, it's $70 million. Pretty.
Yeah, one big check.
Not exactly chump change, even for the folks in Tuscaloosa. So they're going to have to come together. I mean, oftentimes these buyouts are paid by boosters and donors who actually, ironically, right now are funding the NIL era in many ways. So they're going to have to come up with some folks outside the university, most likely, if they really want to pay that buyout and get rid of him. But that is not the first time, nor will it be the last, because the college football coaching buyout carousel, it has a life of its own.
Might lose to Vandy yet again.
By the way, that's on the schedule. All right, our college sports reporter, Amanda Kristovich, thank you so much. We got a lot more front office sports today, right after this.
Alabama, Florida State, years Georgia opened with Clemson, and then Oregon and LSU and Les Miles opened with Oregon and smacked them around. Alabama knocked around USC and Wisconsin and Vatech for years. The SEC fears nobody.
Stop it. I love the SEC. Put them on. By the way, if we just had an only SEC college football playoff show, it would be absolutely wonderful. How about that out there, SEC backers?
SportsGrid's College Football Today.
So the Mets, they went through a rough stretch where they were terrible, but, they win the series versus the Mariners. They're kind of turning things around just a little bit. Like, the offense has been there. You said they were in a playoff race. It's tough to say, they need to win. It's like trying to trust teams in different sports at the end of the season. But the hitters are hitting right now. Lean into the Mets, lean into the Phillies. These teams have something to play for, and they're cooking right now.
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
I think what you saw last year is it's tough to say, it's projectable, but I do think it's something that when you're taking shots here, you're looking for a bye-week coverage wide receiver on your roster or a guy that has upside who's young enough to grow into more of a role. I think the development of Bo Nix was stunningly good last year. If we can build on that again this year, I think Marvin Mims is a really good selection as the 57th wide receiver off the board.
Fantasy Sports Today, only on SportsGrid.
What does he do after he hits the home run? He walks over to the fan and he pats him on the back and gives him a high five. This is the same fan that's been going after him for the entire game. Dave Roberts after the game saying, hey, look, every once in a while, it's kind of funny to see Shohei, who's got this wonderful personality that we almost never see. It was great to see him do that with the fans.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back, everyone, to Front Office Sports Today. I'm Baker Machado. Well, Caitlin Clark broke the internet when she revealed her new logo for her new signature collection with Nike. And now we're learning a little bit more about what that signature shoe debuting next year will look like. Here's our interview with sneaker insider Nick DiPaola. Let's bring in sneaker insider Nick DiPaola, who's got all of those answers for us. Nick, good to see you as always. So what do we think about the Caitlin Clark announcement, and what do we know so far about the launch of a lot of these products?
Well, it was interesting because Nike announced it as an expanded partnership, but really this was in the works all along since she signed last spring. It was part of all the negotiations that she would be getting a signature shoe, signature collection with every brand. So for them to finally unveil the logo, they're going to be dropping a navy and yellow shirt September 1st, and then the full larger collection coming October 1. I think it's definitely much anticipated. There was a lot of questions initially about why wouldn't she have a signature collection in her rookie season, but now we're finally here, and I would say the logo's gotten a really strong response throughout the week.
And in reading just how involved Caitlin Clark was with this entire process around her logo, it's evident she really wanted to make sure every little detail matched her reach, her audience, her impact, her career, and who she is. But I'm curious, how does this compare to other Nike athletes in terms of brand power with Caitlin Clark?
Yeah, so the logo is always sort of the first big step of these deals, right? And I kind of break it down into 3 buckets. So you have what I call initials and number logos, and then you have a symbol logo, so like Kobe's logo, and then you have silhouette. I think everybody's familiar with the Jumpman. So there's kind of 3 approaches you could take. Caitlin and her friends, a lot of people call her CC. And so that was something that all along it sounded like they wanted to be the real marker of her logo. So you see those 2 interlocking C's, but I think the bigger picture piece that's cool to me is we're going to see a lot of this come to life almost as if it's a fashion logo, I would say. I think a lot of the comparison early on was references of Chanel and Gucci and other high fashion brands. So you could kind of see they're taking a little bit of a different approach with the logo in terms of not just making it a sports mark, but kind of keeping things big picture and seeing really how big this signature line could grow.
Well, let's talk about the process in terms of the design process here, because as you mentioned, the shoe's not going to be coming out until next year. Is there more pressure to get this first shoe right because of who she is and what she represents? And how long does it sort of take to put these shoes into production?
Definitely. I think this is probably the most anticipated signature shoe since LeBron's in 2003. So that's 22 years ago. As crazy as that sounds, obviously LeBron's still going, but when it comes to signature shoes, this is a shoe that everybody's been looking forward to. The timeline always is 18 to 24 months. Literally in LeBron's case, and maybe less than a handful of others, has there been a rush timeline. So it really is a longer process that Nike likes to take their time with to make sure they get it right. We just had a similar wait with Asia Wilson. That felt like a really long process from my perspective too. And it was a full 2-year process that fully released this year. So when Caitlin signed last spring in 2024, it was always slotted as a spring 2026 launch to sync with what will be the 30th anniversary WNBA season. Unless there's a lockout, that's another conversation. But that was always the timeline they were tracking on, and something that everybody's anticipating.
Well, I know you mentioned Asia Wilson and her shoe that dropped. I mean, since Cheryl Swoop's iconic first signature shoe dropped back in 1995, we've seen a boost in the last recent years of active current players that have shoes. It's Sabrina Ionescu, it's Brianna Stewart, it's Asia Wilson, Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark as well. How important is it for the WNBA's players to have a signature shoe, and especially for the growth of the league, to get it right in how it's rolled out?
Well, we're seeing a huge resurgence, no doubt. There was a 10-year gap before Brianna Stewart's shoe with Puma. And, basically Caitlin is the 10th Nike athlete to have a signature shoe, but only 15 women in the WNBA league history have had a signature shoe. So when you look at, last season in the NBA, there was 28 players that had their own shoe. That was the most in league history. Still on the W side, it's been few and far between. So in almost 30 years, we've had 15 athletes. But like you said, Cheryl Swoops, to me, is probably the most prolific. She had 7 shoes with Nike. A lot of the other players on that list maybe had 1 or 2 shoes only, but Cheryl was the first. And then Cheryl, of course, has had the first ever retro shoe as well, which was a few years ago. So it's something that we've seen Nike initially invest in when the W came around. And now more recently, there's a huge, huge resurgence. And it's not so much that it's a nice to have or that there's players getting spotlight. This is becoming a real business driver as well. We're seeing Sabrina's shoe was worn by 54 players in the NBA last season. She's trending up towards what's going to probably become a 9-figure business. And Asia Wilson as well. I'm expecting dozens of NBA players to wear that shoe this upcoming NBA season. And we're seeing now the W signature shoes being worn all across colleges as well. So it's not that there's players just wearing the shoes. We're seeing them sort of have an impact across the industry.
We've obviously talked a lot of the names that have these shoe deals. But I guess my big question is none of them are comparable to Michael Jordan and the Air Jordan brand. So I guess my question is do these shoe deals still matter at the end of the day? And is Caitlin Clark a unique enough name that she becomes like a Jordan brand?
Well, obviously Michael Jordan is trending towards probably $10 billion in revenue the next couple of years, and I think that's I always say that's the biggest outlier and the hardest sort of lightning in a bottle to recapture. But for a player to still have a signature business in the, let's call it 100 million to 300 range, that's hugely impactful. And that's just their signature branded product. A lot of times when you think about a player like Caitlin or LeBron or Steph Curry, you think of the halo impact too. How many young girls might buy Nike basketballs, Nike backpacks, other items just because Caitlin's association. So I think what we're going to see with Caitlin and what we're seeing already with Sabrina and Asia is that it'll be, yes, impactful from their signature series, but also sort of extend beyond the brand into other categories as well.
And you talked about the extensive process to even launch a shoe, but as you know, there's more that once a shoe is done still has to happen. In fact, you just came from China yourself as you were out on tour with Anthony Edwards. You've been involved with Kyrie Irving and Klay Thompson's shoe releases in China as well. In this final minute that we have with you, I'm curious, how pivotal are these tours, and what really is the purpose of these types of tours after a shoe's been launched?
So really the China piece is pivotal, I would say, to building a business beyond America. That's the #1 market outside of the US in terms of footwear. And a lot of the brands have thousands of stores throughout the region. So the scale that you're able to drive is crazy. I was along with Ant-Man for 9 days in China. He was just super lively and great, launching the AE2, which is his second shoe with Adidas. He was probably going to be, I think, the most impactful endorser for them since Derrick Rose in the last 15 years. And it's a line that they're really excited to keep building. So as they start to build out his line, the China tour was a must-have, and now we're off and running onto the two.
All, of course, as Anthony Edwards continues to be a bigger force in the NBA as well. Sneaker insider Nick DePaula. Nick, thank you as always. And we have a lot more front office sports today headed your way right after this quick break.
Here's a tip. Some machines and online games have higher average payouts than others. Want to try to maximize your odds? Well, do some research online to find games which have the highest RTP or return to player percentage. So now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
Devon Acham, catfishers are really tricky. I'm not saying he's going to be on the pup list or anything like that, but it is something to monitor. And he is a small running back, and I think chasing last season is just a problem. I can't take him over Derrick Henry at the end of the first round. I think it's crazy. And Ollie Gordon's a player we talked about. Here's the preseason stats for Ollie Gordon, Matt. 26 attempts, 126 rushing yards, 4.8 yards per carry, and a touchdown.
Fantasy only on SportsGrid.
Shohei Ohtani was minus 20,000, I believe, Tom, when we were talking last week. He's down to a minus 4,000, which I still think is fun. I don't know who's saying, now's the time to bet the minus 4,000 here and win some money. Schwarber's a 12-1 price, Machado 10-1, Soto 200-1. It's still going to be Ohtani's award here. They're not playing great baseball for the Dodgers, but I do find it funny. Like, what is the difference between minus 20,000 and minus 4,000? Who knows? Who's got that much money to play anyway?
Pro Baseball Today, only on SportsGrid.
Arch Manning is a 7-1 price to win it. You take a look at Cade Klubnik here for Clemson. He's a 9-1 price. Nussmeier. Then we see Jeremiah Smith. He ain't a quarterback, Joe. He's a wide receiver. Love those wide receivers.
Yeah, Ryan Williams is another one from Alabama. Yep. Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams will battle it out for best wide receiver, potentially leading their teams to a college football playoff.
SportsGrid's College Football Today.
Playing online blackjack and want to try upping your odds? Well, here's a tip. Cheat cards tell you statistics for whether you hit or stand on every move. If you're into stats, this could be your ticket to winning. And it is totally legal. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
The Pirates use that thing, Joe. It's like once every 15 years, we'll hope for the perfect storm with lightning in a bottle, then we'll try to rebuild it again. Enough, man. In this day and age, with the prospects that you can certainly have by stinking every year and top-flight talent like you see in Paul Skeens, it's just a shame, and it gets on my nerves. Like, for me, being a Phillies fan, I think it's hilarious. Like, I never want Pittsburgh to be good. Why? Not because it's a rivalry. It's just a team you don't have to worry about in the playoffs, and your team can make the playoffs.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
The NFL has ruined the concept of trade requests. It's not real. It's just a negotiating tactic. I'd appreciate reporters changing the language, because in the NBA, when a player requests a trade, they get dealt. In the NFL, nobody actually thinks it matters. If Jacoby Myers is going to buck that trend, and if Jacoby Myers is going to get traded, we'll see where he goes.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Hopefully starting in 2027, where I think the schedule could just completely get blown up, which would be so exciting for the fans, the players. So there's interesting things that I've heard that that would be like one of the first things that could say that people are talking about, and that things could really get changed up a little bit.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Playing online blackjack and want to try upping your odds? Well, here's a tip. Cheat cards tell you statistics for whether you hit or stand on every move. If you're into stats, this could be your ticket to winning. And it is totally legal. Now, go get lucky. See you in Las Vegas. Let's get lucky.
The Pirates use that thing, Joe. It's like once every 15 years, we'll hope for the